Hi everybody, this is Oksana. In this video we're going to be making this fun little pumpkin just in time for fall. This is an all-round wire tutorial. It is a remake of an older tutorial from October 2021, but that video did not involve all-round wires, and also it didn't have these fun little swirls on the sides. So because this is all-round wires, there is some weaving involved, which makes this slightly more challenging. And I want to say a huge thank you to Rio Grande for sponsoring this video. They have awesome wire, which I'm going to be using in this video, and it comes on these nice big spools, so you have plenty of wire. And they also have awesome little embellishments like these little beads here, these little copper beads. They come in a variety of sizes. I'm going to be using the 2mm here, you see in the center of that flower. And they have wonderful tools as well, which I'll be using in this video. The Swanstrom brand and the Lindstrom brand tools I really love from them. So let's go ahead and get started making this fun little pumpkin. We're going to start with 2 pieces of 20 gauge copper wire. It is dead soft, and the length of the 2 pieces is about 14.5 inches long. My dogs ate this little measuring tape there. And for the tools, you are going to need your wire cutters. These are mine. They are Swanstrom brand. And then you are also going to need some regular pliers and some round nose pliers. The ones I'm using are Lindstrom. My regular pliers are called RX 7890. And my round nose pliers are RX 7590. And then you're going to need an oval stone, or you can experiment with other shapes, like a round stone would probably look good as a pumpkin also. But mine is an oval Goldstone, and it's 30mm wide this way, but yours can be just kind of anywhere in that vicinity. It doesn't have to be this exact size. So what we're going to do with our 2 wires is we're going to bring the ends of them together, and that's going to allow us to kind of determine where the middle is. And there in the middle, just keeping the wires together side by side, we are going to form a loop. The loop basically just kind of forms itself if you stick with this little crisscross that the wires are doing naturally. It forms this little loop, and just try to keep the wires side by side like this. And now what we want to do is hold that loop, but then kind of push on those wires to bend them so that the wire is going straight this way, like this. And we're going to do that on the other side as well. So this is the end result here. Here's a little loop. The 4 wires are together. Now they can move out of place like this. Nothing is keeping them together. So we are going to put a piece of painter's tape to hold that together, because now we're going to do some weaving on these 4 wires here. So now we're going to do a weaving pattern, and the purpose of that is just to hold the 4 wires together. I'm going to be using 28 gauge round wire as my weaving wire. You can use 26. It's a little bit thicker, and I prefer the 28 because especially later in the video when I'm using it to attach the little swirls of the pumpkin, the thinner wire works better, so might as well use the same wire all through the video. So for these 4 wires, what you want to do is kind of separate them here at the ends so that it's easy for you when you're weaving and you're trying to put your wire, you know, say above the first wire, in the middle of the 2 wires. It's all, they're not crisscrossing, and you know like where to put it. So the way we're going to start this weaving pattern is by putting the wire above that very bottom wire there. And then we're going to pull it up and put it above the second wire, and then down below the second wire, like this. and now up and above the third wire, third from the bottom, and below the third wire, and then up and above the fourth very top wire, and also then underneath that fourth wire. And what that does is it forms like a little loop around each wire. And now to bring our wire back down before we repeat that, we're going to pull it down, and then when we go down, we're going to go down by 2. So the first top 2 wires here, we're going to put it underneath them like this. Then we're going to put it in between them to bring it back to the front. So it's almost like up 1, down 2, up 1. Now we're going to go down 2 again. This time it's these 2 wires in the middle. Then we're going to go up and then put it in between the 2 wires in the middle. And now we're going to bring it down all the way down and then wrap it around that bottommost wire. So it's coming above, and you bring it around and you made that little wrap, and that's how we started off this pattern. So now we're going to wrap around the second wire. So we're bringing it above and then below that second wire, and then same thing for the third wire, bring it above and then below, and then same thing for the very top wire. And I'm leaving the pattern spaced out here so you can see it more clearly, but ideally what you want to do as you weave your pattern is you want to push it together for a nice tight weave like that. So now we're going to bring it back down. So we're going to go down across the top 2 wires, bring it underneath them to the back, and we're going to go up 1 wire, and so bringing it in between the top 2 wires to the front again. Down 2, up 1, down 2, and then just around that bottommost wire. And then that pattern just repeats and repeats. So you want to do this for a little bit, because what's going to happen is we're going to have our stone, then we're going to have this loop, and the top of the loop will be visible above the stone, and then this weave is going to go to maybe right about here, because then these wires are going to be separating. When you're done, you can remove the tape. Here it is here, going all the way down to the bottom. And what you want to do is separate the wires on the very edges there, and before you trim this wire, you just want to wrap it in the direction that it's going a few more times just around the single wire. And then when you trim it, same thing with this wire here, just make sure that your little wire ends end up on the same side here, because this will be the side touching the stone, so your wire ends are hidden. And I know that my weaving pattern could be more pushed together, but I think it looks cool this way too, and this way it's a little bit quicker to get the length that you need, leaving it like this. So I'm going to push down on the little wire end up here just to kind of smush it down, and then the one down here as well, just push it down so it's not sticking up, and then this will be the side touching your stone so that the wire ends will be hidden. They'll be touching the stone. So center your wires. You want most of your loop to be visible, but not so high that you see the wrap, just kind of like this. You want a tiny bit of space here on the bottom, and you want to bend these wires to the front, and then these wires, we open them, so you want them to be open, but you also want them to be like the same to each other. So when you bend them to the front, they're going to be in the same location here on the edges. Okay, you can kind of gently bend them to the front a little bit, but now we're going to flip it over and we're going to work on the 2 wires here first. So what you want to do is take those wire ends, curve them down, and push them through the loop like this. This part is tricky because we're also trying to hold the stone in place, and the stone wants to move around, and you're trying to keep it all centered. You could potentially use the tape and just put like a piece of tape on the back maybe. I don't know if that would hold well enough, but you could give it a try. So we just want to make sure that that is centered, and then you want to take the wire that's on the right here and bend it to the right, and then the wire that's on the left here, bend it to the left. And we're just going to push these wires open a little bit with our fingers. Like that. You can use your pliers as well. If you're having trouble separating them with your fingers, you can go in there with your pliers and then just kind of like shape the wires. Basically, we want them to get wider, kind of in the middle. Oh, the stone can still move. So like that. And now what we're going to do with these wires is we're going to lock them in place by wrapping them around. And you see this little space here. You want your wire end to be, I'll show you guys, you want your wire end to be nice and small so that it reaches just across this little gap and it's not too long. You can kind of end up trimming it later as well. Like if it ends up too long and you start bending in this way and you see it's just going way past, it's too long, you can trim it some more. Basically, see how it just fills in that little area? And I'm just going to press that down to have just a nice tight little wrap there. And then we're going to do that on this side as well. And we're going to keep this excess. We're going to do the bail with it at the end. So now we're going to take the little wire end, and it's just long enough to reach there. So we're just going to smush it down. Try to keep your stone nice and centered. And we're just going to push that down, make that little wrap. So now you can kind of mess around with this a little bit. There, that's looking even, I think. Just kind of right in the center like that. Looks like an eye, doesn't it? Maybe there's a way I can do an eye pendant with this idea. Then we're going to take these wires here. We had bent them a little bit. Just want to make sure that they still look like they're in an equidistant spot here from the center. So we're going to take one at a time and we're going to put it through the loop. Let's take a look at that. Okay. And these ones we're going to wrap all the way around to make a nice complete tight wrap there. So I'm using my pliers to help guide the wire in there, make that nice little tight wrap so it's wrapping all the way around, pressing down on that. Then it's going towards the front here, and here it is. So we're keeping the end of the wire there. Now we're going to take this one. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to look to make sure that it looks kind of even with the other wire there. Yep, I think that looks even. Let's see how it looks from the back. So then we're going to wrap it all the way around the loop. Just guiding it through there with my pliers. And now we're going to press down and bring it across to the front. All right, so now your stone is secure. So if you ended up putting a piece of tape or something on the back to keep it from moving, it should no longer be moving. It should be nice and secure. And now it's all about the decoration of the pumpkin. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna make some swirls with these wires here. So feel free to do whatever kind of swirls that you want, that you like, but I'm just gonna take the wire and just use my fingers to make a swirl in one direction, and then I'm going to have it go in the other direction, and I'm gonna try to vary the size of my swirls. So some are larger and some are smaller. So for the smaller one, I'm gonna come in here with my round nose pliers, just because it's hard for me to bend it because it's so small. So I've trimmed this wire and left myself a nice end here so that I can make one final swirl. I'm going to use my round nose pliers and kind of squish the end of the wire there. And now I am trying to swirl it around here and make a nice big, just make a nice big swirl here at the end, like this. All right. That looks good. And now we're just gonna make swirls on the other side here. So you can try to do the same thing and mimic this side, or you can do something different and have, you know, the swirls be completely different size, different shape. I'm gonna start out the same way here by making a swirl, and then I think what I'll do is I'll try to make more swirls on this side. So now I'm making kind of a smaller one this way, and now I'm bending it the other way and making another one. I think I need help from my round nose pliers here. Make it nice and small. That looks good. So now I am just gonna trim it, leave myself a little bit of wire there to make that last and final swirl that I'm making with my round nose pliers. So I'm kind of squishing the tip of that wire, starting that little curl there, and then I'm just gonna keep going. Like that. Now I'm gonna flatten it with my pliers, and then here are my swirls. So now we have to attach them. To attach our swirls, you just need a tiny little bit of that 28 gauge round wire we were using, just a few inches long. And the tricky thing is getting it underneath this wire here, because we want to attach the swirl to the closest wire. You don't want to leave them like this, because what happens is things will get caught on them, like hair and clothing. See how it moves, and then it'll just lift up out of place. So one thing you can do if you're having trouble getting your wire underneath is you can try to just take your pliers and just kind of gently pull on this wire a little bit. See if we can make a little gap there, and then we can push that wire back down afterwards. All right, I think I've created a little bit of a gap there. So this should work. Yep, here it is. All right, so first I'm gonna wrap just around that wire there, and then I'll attach the swirls. So here's my little end. So I'm gonna be wrapping kind of going up just around a bunch of times to make sure that it's well attached. I would say maybe 6 times would be adequate. So you can see those little wraps forming. We'll push them all nice and together at the end. Let's push them together. And then when you're ready to finish the wire, you just trim it, leave yourself a little wire end, and then you take that wire end and you just kind of curve it down the direction the wire naturally was going, and we're just going to kind of push it down in there so it's like continuing that little movement that it was doing there. And now we're ready to attach the swirl. So to attach it, we're going to put the wire through the swirl and then underneath this wire, like that. You can see that little wrap. We're going to do that again. Tried to do it with my fingers but couldn't. I'm going to do it with my pliers. There we go. That's another one. And that's good, or you can do one more, up to you. I'll just do a third one. There we go. Push that all nice and together. And now we can't just trim the wire, we have to wrap it around just the single wire there. Now I'm having trouble getting it underneath because that little lift we created was over there and not here, so I'm just going to try to lift it up a little bit here. Straighten out my little end there. It's getting all bent out of shape. There we go. Got it under there. And make just a few of these wraps, maybe like 6 or so, to make sure it's not going to unravel before we trim it off. All right, that looks good. Bring that nice and tight together, and now we can trim. Take the wire end, curve it down, and push it down, and it almost just like goes underneath the wire there. Now if there's any gaps still, you can press down. My gaps kind of got filled in with that wire, so now this loop, nice and secure, gets caught on clothing or hair, not even moving. And we just need to do that on the other side now. So first I'm going to lift the wire up, then I'm going to get my little thin wire underneath. Oops, it went through the loop, which I don't want quite yet. First I want to wrap it just by itself. So I'm just going to do that several times. And then when I'm ready to finish, trim and curve that wire end, push it down. Let's get that nice and tight together. So I'm just pushing it down to the area of the swirl. There, just trying to line it up. And now we're going to take the remainder of the wire. I'm going to actually hold this as I take the wire, because sometimes when you bend the wire it turns this whole little wrap, and then the wire end, even though it's under there, can get turned facing you. And now I am attaching the wrap by wrapping through, attaching the swirl. I need to lift this up a little bit. There's no space here for my wire. There we go. Is that enough? Yep. So through the swirl and underneath the wire. Let's do 3 times. That's what we did on the other side, so might as well stick with that number. All right, so that's 2. One more. And 3. And bring that nice and together. And now we are going to wrap just around the single wire. And I'm having trouble getting it underneath. So I'm just going to lift that a little bit. There we go, much better. And let's just do that. Several more times, and then we will be done with this very tedious step of attaching the swirls. And ready to move on to the next tedious step, which is going to be attaching a leaf and a flower, which is optional, by the way, but I'll show you what I'm going to do with that. All right, so this is good. Let's trim and push down that wire end, carve it down, push it under there. All right, so here's your little pumpkin. If you like it just how it is and you want it to remain made entirely out of wire, you can attach the little bail forward through to the end, where I'm going to show you how to do that. Or if you want to add some little charms to it, I'm going to add a flower and a leaf, and I'm going to do that now using another small piece of the 28 gauge round wire. This is probably like 6 inches long or so, just long enough where you feel comfortable working with it. And we are going to be using one of these little beads. If you want to find these on the Rio Grande website, you type in this number here and they're going to pop up. These are 2 millimeters. And then I have a flower and a leaf charm. They are plastic, and I just found them on Etsy. So whenever you're searching, you could just search like plastic leaf bead or plastic flower bead or acrylic, and just read the size to make sure they're not huge. About 10 millimeters maybe the flower is, the leaf's a little bit bigger. So we're going to take the little 2 millimeter bead, or maybe you already have some flowers and leaves in your collection you would like to use, and we're going to slide the little bead on there, kind of roughly halfway, and now we are going to hold that bead with our pliers. Just kind of hold it so that I can smush this wire down. I basically don't want there to be a gap. So I'm pressing the 2 wires, I'm pressing them together as tightly as I can like this, so that when I put it through my flower, it's just going to be right in the middle there. like this. And then I'm going to put it through the leaf as well. So you can do just the flower, you can do the flower and the leaf, up to you. So there we go. This is what I'm going with. Now we are going to separate these out. And to attach them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put each one of these underneath one of these wires. So these wires here actually have a natural gap there on the bottom that you can maybe see. So I don't have to lift them up to make a gap. Instead, I'm going to put it through where there is a natural gap, and then I'll work it upwards where I want it to go. So I want it to move up. And instead of putting it through up here where there is no gap, I'm going to put it through down here and just kind of move that up. Careful, your wire might do this thing that my wire's doing. You want to just kind of gently fix that. There we go. It formed like a little bubble. All right, so moving up. So one wire's going underneath this and the other that. And we're just kind of gently and slowly moving them up until it just goes as high as it can go. And there it is here. There is going to be some movement. That leaf can kind of jiggle side to side, and the flower can maybe turn a little bit as well, but it's going to be locked in place. It's just retains a little bit of movement. So make sure that these are pulled tight. There isn't any kind of loose wire there. And now we're going to wrap this around just this wire before we can trim it. So I'm going to put it where that little gap is, and then I'm going to just pull on it tight, and it makes a little wrap. If it bothers you having to put it through all the way down here, you can just lift this wire up, make a nice gap for yourself like here or something. Instead of doing this whole bit, put it through the bottom, bring it to the top. So you want to wrap that around a bunch of times. I would want that flower and leaf to be really secure. I'm going to get back to this wire. Let me wrap this one just so it's attached at both sides, at least a little bit, and then we can work on wrapping that around a bunch of times. So there's one and another. All right, so it has 3 wraps now on each side. So I'm going to continue with that just off camera because it's going to be very similar and repetitive. I'm just going to keep wrapping and wrapping these around. I want to have a bunch of these wraps just to make sure that that flower is nice and secure. Maybe like 10, 15 wraps. Just keep going with that, and I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I'll come back to you guys. All right, so I've continued that. You can see I have quite a few wraps going on there on both sides, and what I'm going to do is just move that leaf out of the way, and I'm going to trim and tuck away this one up here, and then I'll do the other one. So just bending that and tucking that under to get rid of that wire end. Oh, and the leaf just moved itself out of the way for us. So now I'm going to do this side, and we are almost done. Press that down, and now that is attached. Now you have a few separate options here. You can leave this as it is and just do a lark's knot. So if you take your chain or necklace that you want to wear it on and you put it through like this, like a little loop, and then through that loop you get the remainder out. It ties a little knot like this called a lark's knot, and you can just wear the pendant like that. Or you can just attach a chain or a necklace with just a regular jump ring, or you can make your own bail, your own dangly little bail, which is what I'm gonna do. So here's a piece of scrap wire that we cut earlier in the very beginning of the video. It's just a little excess piece of wire, and I am going to trim that. So it is 2 inches long. All right, and what we're gonna do now is take our pliers and fold it in half. As good as you can get it. It's not gonna be perfect. We're gonna fix up the little ends, so just kind of slowly squish it in half. It's a little bit slippery. It's gonna wanna jump out of there like that, turn. But you just gotta keep at it, pressing it until it's just completely squished in half like that. And then I like to just kind of run this through my fingers, trying to get the wire ends to be together as well. They were kind of separating out there. And now with my wire cutters, I'm just fixing up the ends there so they're the same. And I'm using some bail making pliers, and I'm gonna use the 3rd size here for the size of my bail. Feel free to do whatever size bail you need for your purposes there. And that makes a little loop like this. And now we just have our little wire ends here, which I'm using the smallest size to bend those, and I'm gonna leave myself a little gap there. I'm not gonna close them up all the way, but I'm gonna leave them like this. And then I'll take my little pumpkin and I will put it on the bail. This is like a dangly bail. And then I'm gonna take my pliers and close up that loop, 1 wire at a time. It's easiest for me. And the other side. There we go. Now it's completely closed. Now you can see the regular part of the bail is having a little tiny gap there. I'm gonna close that up. So here is the finished piece, and it kind of dangles on the dangly bail there. Now the last thing that I want to say is, if you are having a hard time with the weaving, because that's probably the most difficult part of this project, or maybe attaching these as well, what I can suggest is using half round wire instead, because with the half round wire you can just wrap it around and around like this. And then in this pumpkin, which is the same, I also used half round wire here to make these attachments. I'm not sure if this part is any easier with the half round wire, but this part definitely is, because you're just wrapping it around and around. So just another option if you have half round wire. It can make your life a little bit easier. But on the other hand, the woven pattern's kind of cool looking on the back here. So that is the finished pumpkin. If you enjoyed this tutorial, leave me a like on this video and be sure to subscribe. I make a new video every weekend. Thank you for watching. Bye.